What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to a great episode of Locked On Badgers with a terrific guest as always. We're going to get into how many NFL receivers do we think are on the depth chart, and did Graham Mertz cause the downfall of Paul Chryst? I got some hot takes on that. I know Rajeev does as well. We're going to talk about it next on Locked On Badgers. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. Really do appreciate everybody tuning in. We got Rajeev with us today, so we're going to bring him in as always. Thank you, everybody, once again, making this one of your first listens. We really do appreciate it. And as always, when we get Rajeev in, some people, there's a little bit of faith out there that is lacking. And some people need a little.
Winning a national title? Absolutely. Going on Final Four runs? Why not? It's Believe with Rajeev on today's Locked On Badgers.
My friend, how are you today?
I'm doing well. I'm sporting, for those that are listening to this, I'm sporting the new Hop on the Gus Bus sweatshirt that Ryan so nicely sent to me. It is awesome. Let's get out there and support our guys with some NIL stuff. Can't wait.
Yeah, and I sent, if you were at the live event, we gave some away to trivia winners. That took a little bit longer to get out, so hopefully everyone should have their Gus Bus stuff now. We had to order because I didn't know what sizes. There's a whole thing, but everybody should have their Gus Bus stuff now. I wanted to send Rajeev and Justin one as well, just because they're amazing people and they do so much to support the show. I will put the link. I had a couple people ask, where can we get those amazing sweatshirts, the Gus Bus stuff? I'll put a link in the show. Go get it. It's awesome. It fits well. It looks great. His mom designed it. He gets a cut of the NIL stuff. And if you've been listening for more than a minute, you know I'm on the Gus Bus. So let's support that if we want to. Rajeev, I got a bunch of stuff to get into today. I want to start here. We had a great question, and this one was from Jesse Erickson. And again, I always have to pare questions down because I can only fit so many characters on the screen on YouTube. But he mentioned that in a previous show, I think it was me and Justin, and Rajeev, I don't know if you were in on that one. We said Danny Davis and Kendric Pryor probably would not be in the too deep on the receiver depth chart this year. He mentioned that both players, UDFA, they had at least had a cup of coffee. The Bengals, I think the Packers with Danny Davis at least tried them out. Maybe we're too low on those players. So where would they fit into this year's depth chart? And how many NFL dudes do you think we have in the receiver room right now?
So I think Davis and Pryor actually would fit in on the depth chart. They brought a lot of talent and speed and overall ability to the team. I don't think they're on the one line, but I think they're in that two line. They're kind of like maybe looking at the sort of Quincy Burrows sort of level, maybe the McIntosh kind of Vinny Anthony area. I think that's where they kind of sit.
But are those guys on the two? Just for clarity.
Well, no, they're not. They're not really on the two. You're right. But I do think they could. Look, it wouldn't surprise me if they were on this team, Davis or Pryor, basically backing up some of the first guys. Yeah, I think they could do. I mean, look, our receiver room is so deep. This is why this is difficult, right? Because normally, sure, they're on the one line, they're on the two line, but we have legitimately 6 to 8 to 9 to 10 wide receivers. I mean, who knows? But I think they're better than maybe if you're saying not in the too deep. I think they're probably challenging for that too deep. As far as the NFL, I mean, obviously you never know, right? But as far as pure potential, CJ Williams is at the top of that list. I feel like he's the guy that if he doesn't get drafted, I think it'd be a surprise. The other guy that I put in there, we haven't seen him yet, is Bryson Green because of just the talent that he brings and what he's done elsewhere. And he's a guy that should be able to translate. Will Pauling is another one. I feel like, he's a slot receiver. He's got some unique capabilities. I feel like that's a good one. I don't really see Chimere Dike as that. And I love Chimere Dike, but I just don't feel like he translates to the league as much as some of the guys that have more raw physical talent like CJ does. I would like to think that Skylar Bell will, because, he's my guy and I love him. And I think he's got a lot of growing to do. So are any of these guys NFL ready now? No, maybe Chimere maybe is a UDFA, but I feel like you're really going to get CJ, Bryson, Pauling, maybe Skylar Bell as the people that I would say have NFL potential, that especially with CJ Williams. That guy is going to be fantastic all throughout his career here and at the next level.
So if someone gave you a number of all the receivers right now, 3.5 over under going to be drafted.
Drafted, I would say under, because I just don't know. I mean, I would say 3 drafted. Now, if you tell me over and under getting playing time in the NFL, I would go over on that.
By the way, how ludicrous is it that we're having a conversation over how many receivers in the Wisconsin room are going to get drafted, and the number isn't 0? Right?
I know.
Like, we're like, I don't know, 3, 4, is it 5? Right? Like, that's insane to me that we're having that discussion.
It's just so funny because over the years, right, we've just seen these like spurts at wide receiver. We had guys like Lee Evans and Brandon Williams, and we had guys who were like really good, Nick Toon, and guys that really like stepped up and played well. They were surprised to us, right? They never came in and said, "Oh, these guys are going to blow up," but they did really well. And that was one guy. We talked about one guy, maybe two guys that we have these great receivers. But now it's like, where does the line stop? I mean, we're also talking about, we have a freshman coming in Tretch that is so talented in the slot and the separation that he can get. He's not even listed anywhere because he hasn't even showed up yet. So, I mean, wow. Like, we're not talking about one or two guys. We're talking about 6, 7, 8 guys that really could have been starters on the last 5 years of Badger teams, right? Like, all 8 of those guys would have been starters on 5 years of Badgers.
Right. And that's really an interesting distinction there, is the depth of the team right now. If you were to spread that out over the last several years, all these guys could have potentially been starters. I want to look back to the beginning, and I want to partially agree with you and retract. So I don't think Kendric Pryor, I'm going to be honest, I don't think Kendric Pryor would be fighting for a 2 deep spot on this team. I think he was a little too limited, a little too slight. Now, Danny Davis is a guy who I think I've probably not been. I think he has a big catch radius, really good hands, enough speed. I think he's a guy that probably would be fighting for those reps inside that 2 deep somewhere. And to the fact that they caught on as UDFAs, that's not nothing. People shrug that off. That's an indication of talent, of some type of pedigree, of some type of skill set there that NFL teams the NFL teams don't do people favors, right? They don't bring you in even to camp unless they see some type of carrying skill set. So I would say I was probably a little too harsh on Danny Davis there, but even then, this whole conversation speaks to the depth of that unit. And I also want to point out, because I know we're going to get a comment along the lines of, "Yo, you guys, just chill. Let's see how these guys play before we." This is based on a question we got from Jesse Erickson, who I love, by the way. So I really do appreciate the question. But we're just talking who we see as NFL potential. We're not saying the Badgers are rolling 4 NFL second rounders out there, but I agree. There's 3 or 4 guys who potentially you could see in the NFL, and it wouldn't shock me based on the body types.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fun thing to talk about too, right? Yeah, it's obviously very premature, but it's also just fun to look at this receiver room and think, wow, like, we've never had anything like this. I mean, look, we could also do this with the quarterback room and look at which ones of those guys might get looks at the NFL. And I think we got 2 solid options. But yeah, I mean, we've never been able to do that before. We've never been able to actually talk about, other than our linemen and our running backs and certainly linebackers, we haven't had a lot of positions on the offense where we can say, oh yeah, like, how many guys are going to get drafted or be UDFAs? And because as a UDFA, you're still cream of the crop college football, right? I mean, to get on any NFL roster, even for a short time, even for the preseason, like, you're clearly good enough to play with those top level football athletes.
Yeah, we're certainly going to lead off Believe with Rajeev with how many players are going to get drafted at some position.
Exactly.
Let's go. Let's get some optimism. I love it. But I want to kick this back to you, because this is Believe with Rajeev. Every Tuesday we try to do this. I responded to this question, but I want to get your take on this. This is from Rudy Dad 54. Sorry, but Wisconsin football recruiting looks just like it did before Fickell. 3-star after 3-star, another class out of the top 25. And just for context, I've already talked about this, but the Badgers have 1 4-star recruit. Every other recruit per the composite is a 3-star or lower. Curious on your take here.
He didn't even have a full cycle. So this is not like look, and I'm going to say when, because I believe that it's going to happen. When this team comes out and starts throwing the ball over the map this year, rises up those rankings, wins the Big Ten West, competes in the Big Ten championship game, and who knows what else. And the culture shift that we're seeing is displayed on the field, because right now it hasn't really been displayed on the field. I expect it to be. That's really when, in the next recruiting cycle and the one after that, there's just going to be so much more optimism and draw to the UW program that I think that it's going to fix itself, right? And I think that, he's going to, I've said this before, he's going to kind of tailor the recruits as to what he wants and what he needs based on the athletes that he's looking for, based on the system that he wants to run. So I'm not worried at all about his recruiting, because it will only get better. Now, if 3 years from now we're still talking about 3-star after 3-star, then it's a different discussion. But with everything else going on an upward trajectory with this program, I would think that the same thing's going to happen in recruiting. The other thing I would say is look at the recruiting department that Paul Chryst built, or I should say the lack thereof a recruiting department that Paul Chryst had, right? And now look at these guys and what they're doing, and him coming in right away and talking about building the program from a 300-mile radius. You can obviously see he's already looking at other parts of the country. I absolutely foresee a time where we're getting 4s on the regular. We're popping in some 5s. Like, that's going to happen if everything goes according to sort of my belief, if you will, in that we're going to win a lot of games. We're going to be throwing the ball a lot more. We're still going to be playing good defense. We're going to be competing for championships in the Big Ten. And this is what's going to continue. Thus, you're going to get better recruits. It's a cyclical thing, right? I mean, you have to be playing good football to get the good recruits, and vice versa. So I feel like it will grow with time.
I think, yeah, I'm mostly there with you. I will say I'll be a little disappointed in this in-state cycle. If Nathan Roy goes elsewhere, I still think they bungled the Sexton recruitment. But I want to point out, and I think this is something that doesn't get talked about enough. We've heard this recruiting department talk about reaching out. We've already made contact with kids 2 classes away, right? The infrastructure for classes gets built years in advance. And to your point, these coaches in this recruiting department haven't been here to build that infrastructure. So I don't think I would give them 3 years, but if we don't, I also am not going to judge them based on half the year, if that makes sense. Because it takes time to build up relationships with recruits, not just right now. Those other colleges have already started that years in advance.
Right. Those pipelines, right? I mean, they with Tretch coming here, and I know Tretch was originally not with him, but that's a pipeline now to one of the best high school programs in the country, which is a mile away from me right now in Bishop Gorman. And those pipelines, those especially in-state pipelines, right, are going to get built, and those relationships are there. So as I keep going into these schools, as I keep talking to these coaches, that's only going to get better with time.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And I'm mostly there with you on this one. Again, I'm not overly concerned about it right now. I do think next year we need to start seeing that's where I would be a little worried if by next year we're not seeing,
constant uptick, right? It should get better every year, right? We should not have stagnation. It doesn't also need to go straight to, 13 4-stars next year. It just has to, it's a slow progression and a slow build. And I think that's why I said on the last show that I was on, we talked about 9 wins and whether that's disappointment or not. Well, it's how we're playing, right? It's not just about the number of wins. Same thing with recruiting. Is it not just the number of top 4-stars or 5-stars? It's how we're looking, where are the pipelines coming from? Who are we recruiting? And is there a steady rise in those rankings?
Yeah, that's well said. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back with this narrative that's out there. Did Graham Mertz maybe play a role in Paul Chryst's, I don't want to say demise, that sounds too tragic, but his lost job at Wisconsin. We're going to talk about it next on Locked On Badgers. But first, today's show is brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, the place I go to, the place we go to. And it's a great time. The NBA playoffs are on. Baseball's full swing. You can bet on all of it, right? Same game parlays, strikeouts, home runs, hits, rebounds, assists, points. If you're with me, you know that I'm riding with the Suns. Rajeev finally made some money on that Phoenix bet, so I'm excited for him there. I'm riding again on them. Now, listen, I bet with my heart. It is what it is. But if you want to roll with me on that, let's roll together, the Valley of the Sun. And I do it all on FanDuel. It is America's #1 sports book. Safe, secure, super easy to use, instant payouts. Not like those other apps where you have to wait, you have to figure things out. It's complicated. FanDuel is incredibly easy to use. The customer support is incredible. And it's where I go to lay my money on Devin Booker winning a title, winning an NBA Finals. I bet on FanDuel. I suggest you do the same. You will not be disappointed. And you get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 back. Bonus bets if your first bet doesn't hit. So go to visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And I want to take a second to thank all the everydayers listening every single day. If you're with us this morning, we did a live show. We talked, a lot about some of the comments you had. We talked about Braden Locke, quarterback of the future, ? And if you're with us today, we got Rajeev. We got more content coming to you tomorrow. Stay tuned. As always, making it one of your first listens every day. Rajeev, I want to bring you back on and talk about this narrative that I've seen. I've seen it on a Badgers podcast. I've seen fans talk about it. You mentioned it's going on in our Discord a little bit. There's a narrative that Graham Mertz, when Paul Chryst made the decision, I'm going to go to Graham Mertz. I'm not going to play Jack Coan, which led to a whole set of dominoes falling over. that was the beginning of the demise for Paul Chryst. That decision played a critical role in what happened the next several years for Paul Chryst. I am curious your thoughts on this. I want to quickly start by saying I think that narrative is mostly is incredibly false, actually. I think a lot of what did Paul Chryst in was not the decision to go with Graham Mertz. It was an archaic offense. It was an inability to adjust. It was a recruiting department that he failed to build. It was a changing college football landscape that he wasn't adaptable towards. I think that's what did Paul Chryst in, and people are scapegoating it on the Mertz decision.
I agree with you completely. I mean, it wasn't Graham Mertz that that made horrible time management decisions, horrible in-game decisions when it comes to when to punt and when not to punt and when to go for it and when to do what. Time and time again, we were very upset with some of the decisions he made. And I would say the number one thing, maybe not number one, number two, is recruiting department. Like that recruiting department is all on him, and it wasn't there. Look at his assistant coaching hires, right? Al Johnson. We've talked about this before. My goodness, like the Graham Mertz decision. Okay, so we were talking about this in the Discord. By the way, for those, I need to post more in the Discord, but I'd love to read all the stuff in the Discord. We have some great stuff in Discord. So if you're not on our Discord, definitely, I'm sure Ryan posts the link somewhere, whatever, but it's really great to get in there and have good Badger talk. So, but yeah, the discussion was whether or not, if he would have gone with Coan, what would have happened? So Mertz probably would have transferred, right? I mean, in this day and age, that would have happened. We probably would have been a little better. Maybe Paul Chryst is still here because we would have been a little bit better with Coan. And then what happens after Coan? So you just don't know, but it's not on Mertz. Now, did Mertz make the job harder for him? Yeah, because obviously Mertz didn't play very well. But if you ask the question, well, why didn't Mertz play well? Well, we don't know. So Florida seems to think Mertz is going to be pretty good. So he's obviously there. But with the offense that was in place, with the recruiting department that was in place, with the fact that Al Johnson was coaching a position that he didn't need to be, a lot of things went into why Graham Mertz was unsuccessful. I hope he does well at Florida. I don't think he will. Sorry, but I just feel like it's not because of Graham Mertz that the Paul Chryst thing went down. It's because Paul Chryst made a lot of poor decisions. And he took the program that was here and he slowly stepped it down into where it was. Losing to Illinois, getting pummeled by Illinois at Camp Randall Stadium. That was the low point. That was the end. All the things that happened from when Graham Mertz got on campus after that Illinois game to the end, the last Illinois game, that's not just on him. That's on a systemic problem that starts at the top with Paul Chryst. Those systemic issues have now been repaired, or at least we expect them to be repaired with Luke Fickell. And that's why there's so much excitement around the program. So no, definitely not on Graham Mertz. I agree with you completely. So many systemic issues, and systemic issues start at the top with Paul Chryst. That
is really, really well said. And everyone take a drink because I'm about to mention offensive ecosystem again. That is one of the buzzwords that I have, but that's really well said, Rajeev, because it was Graham Mertz, to your point, Graham Mertz couldn't have been successful in an offense that was that predictable, that had coaches, and you mentioned obviously, Al Johnson coaching run, but Chris Herring was coaching tight ends. He'd never coached tight ends. Like Bobby Ingram was the offensive coordinator, and was he though? Was he calling plays? Nobody really knows. Like the whole thing was a disaster, and people are going to expect a quarterback to succeed there. Of course he did. He had a different offensive play caller every single season. Is that on Graham Mertz? It's obviously not. And what, to your point, let's say he goes with Coan, that doesn't fix any of the other issues. Like the in-game coaching, we've seen the Army decision, not going for 2. These are really easy things that the head coach needs to be responsible for. So no, it was not on Graham Mertz, the demise of Paul Chryst. The demise of Paul Chryst was self-inflicted wounds over a course of several years that, quite frankly, I don't think we saw the cracks when they first started, or we didn't talk about it enough, but they became pretty evident towards the end. And if we would have gone with Jack Coan, and it might not have been now, he might not be out now, so we might not have Fickell. Thank God we do. But it was still the trajectory of the program is still going in the same direction. With Coan, without Coan, with Mertz, without Mertz, it's still going in the same direction, no matter what. Yeah, I got a couple comments I want to throw up here. One of them is from Cold Stone. He's just talking about how successful Graham could have been in this system, and he says maybe even more than Tanner. I've started the last one. Let me kick this one to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, but Tanner Mordecai, what he's done, what he did at SMU, Graham Mertz has never had numbers like that, so I don't think more successful than Tanner's going to be. I really hope he does amazing things here next year. But Would he have been better? Sure, certainly, because he would have had more weapons. There would have been more unique offensive play calls. I mean, part of the issue, which we talked about ad nauseum, was predictability, and that affects the quarterback just as much as anyone else too. So he was hurt by Paul Chryst, and he hurt the team both, collectively. He definitely would have been more successful. Not better than Tanner though, just because, in my opinion, just because of the numbers that Tanner has put up already. Now we'll know soon enough, right? When he goes to Florida and he's there, how he plays in the SEC next year, we'll get a good sense with, by the way, good talent around him. We'll get a good sense of what Graham could have done with a better system. But in my opinion, not better than Tanner.
Well, we're also going to get a good sense next year. Quite frankly, to be fair, we don't know what Tanner's going to do in the Big Ten. So sure. I think I agree with you, by the way. I think Tanner's also more elusive. He's more mobile. I think he has a few more attributes for a successful quarterback, but we're going to know. But I think most Badger fans, yourself and I included, are pretty happy with that trade-off at this point. We're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to get into a bunch more of your comments, including a comment from a guy telling me, maybe I'm too hung up on the stars and recruiting rankings. And I think that's an interesting discussion. We're going to talk about that next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show. And a quick second to say thank you again for everybody that's tuned in. Really, really do appreciate it. Let's get Rajeev back on here. Let's not waste any time on Believe with Rajeev. This is from Texas Badger, who, by the way, thank you for the comment. Texas Badger, you're in a lot of the shows. He said, Ryan, don't get so hung up on the 4- and 5-star ratings. I watched Texas with all their 4- and 5-star players be mediocre. About half the guys never lived up to their expectations. I just want to – so I agree. The funny thing is I agree with this statement, but I think it misses a bigger context of successful programs, right? You can recruit really well and still be a terrible program or a mediocre program. We've seen a ton of schools do that. We've seen Auburn do that. We've seen Texas do that. We've seen a lot of schools do this. But you also – I don't think you can win a title unless you get those 4- and 5-star guys. You know what I mean? Like, you have to have the infrastructure in place to develop those players. You have to have the coaches in place to, manage the locker room and the culture. And all of this needs to also happen. But none of that matters if you don't get the elite talent. And typically the elite talent includes a smattering of 4- and 5-star guys.
I agree. It's a tough thing. I mean, I agree with you in general that, yes, in order to win a title, you do need that. But certainly Wisconsin has been successful for many years, having in the top 5 in wins in the last 10 years or whatever that stat is now. And with having the 3-star guys, with having a developmental recruiting system where we brought in players that fit what we wanted, fit our system, and could be developed into what they needed. So it can be done. Can we win Big Ten titles with that? Yes. Can we win national titles with that? Probably not. I think that's you do need that elite level talent. But I will always take a program that develops the 3-star guys and turns them into, perpetual winners and people who can compete versus programs that have the 4- and 5-star guys that just completely, waste them away and don't really develop and don't really compete. Like you mentioned, those mediocre teams, which have better recruits than us. I don't want to be that. I would much rather be the guy that develops and is successful. So yes, I in general also agree. I agree with his statement in the sense that, no, you don't really need to get too hung up on it because ultimately what matters is what you're seeing on the field and the wins. But also if we're talking about national championships, yeah, we're going to need to pull those 4- and 5-star guys.
I think even for Big Ten titles. I mean, no, when I say, let's say though, let's be clear. When I say pull 4- and 5-star guys, I'm not talking about every player in the class, right? I'm not talking about you're recruiting at a top 5 level in the country, but I am saying we've seen it play out on the field with even some of the good Badger teams under Chryst. You don't beat Ohio State unless the talent goes up quite a bit, right? They beat us 10 straight times, and that's a talent thing.
We did have quite a lead in the Big Ten championship a couple few years ago. I mean, we lived with 21-7 or something. I mean, anything can happen. I mean, we've been in some of those games with them.
But what did happen?
Yes, I know. We continue to lose to Ohio State.
Talent won out. So I think even to win a Big Ten title, given the behemoths in the conference, and by the way, the way Michigan is recruiting lately, and USC is coming on board.
Yeah, that's a great point because we so often just kind of we talk about Ohio State a lot because that's who we've been playing in the title games over the years. Yeah, Michigan obviously, and now with USC, and we still haven't really seen a mock-up of kind of how they're going to break up the divisions and whether it's going to be West or however they're going to do it and what that lineup is going to be. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be very difficult. And USC, although they were obviously their top program, they've had a little bit of dip. Guess who's coming right back up to the top of college football? That's USC. So now you've got Michigan, Ohio State, and USC that are just going to be behemoths in the conference. So yeah, fair point. And, but Luke Fickell's the guy to get us there. Got to believe, man.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Let's get some more comments in here. A bunch more that I would like to get to. This one here. This one's going back to Greg Gard, some of our conversation with Greg Gard. This from Tyler Strieber. Marvin Lewis was a guy that won a decent amount in Cincinnati with the Bengals, but they ultimately cut ties because he never win a playoff game. Talking about Greg Gard in March Madness, you need results.
Yeah. I mean, you do, but I'm gonna die on the hill of Greg Gard is still the guy for this program, and I think that it's how I feel, and I feel like we're not that far. We're really not. And yes, he's got to win in the tournament, and he will. I don't think that we're not going to the Final Four anytime soon, but we are going to be competing. We are going to be getting better than we are.
Yep, I think that's well said. Jim Sainsbury says, again, in relation to which program's going to win it first, basketball, football, he says neither, to be blunt. Unless you get a top 5 recruiting class, you won't do that for a couple years in a row. I just want to throw that comment up here from Jim, and thank you for all the comments as well, Jim. We talked about this a lot. Basketball or football, which is more likely to win a title. We had a bunch of comments on this. Blake Nelson also said basketball, or he actually says football, because occasionally the football, a Florida State, an Auburn, a Texas can jump in there, and which is a right combination of quarterback and talent can win a football title. Whereas in basketball, it's typically the Kentuckys, the Dukes. It's more of a perennial, typically. So that's Blake's point on that. This one is from Tom Nesis. I want to pause on this one. Tom, as always, thank you. He said, I'm on a hold for recruiting. Let's see where they are July 1st when the summer camps are over, and also the new practice facility. That's another thing in conjunction with Fickell that we haven't talked about a lot. The facilities are getting a major uplift.
Yeah, Tom, very good point. And we have definitely not talked about this. And that's a big thing for guys these days, right? I mean, the McLean Center is old and it needs to be upgraded, and it will be upgraded. So yeah, that's going to be a big thing. And the other piece of this that we've touched on in the past a little bit is NIL, right? The more the varsity collective continues to grow and we can provide these guys what they need, it's not just about, what your product is on the field and your facilities. It's about money. So there's going to be that piece of it as well that I believe will also grow with Fickell, right? Because as he's here and as more people are supporting the program because he's doing better and he's changing the culture, letting fans into the program more than he ever has before, that theoretically will help bump up that collective and bump up some of that money coming in, which will in turn help the recruits. But very good point about the facilities. We haven't talked about that much at all.
No, I agree. And one of the things I want to point out, Rajeev, I see a lot of fans, and I get the quick snap perception of it, of, these kids, they just want shiny things, right? Build a new weight room and they'll come, and it's this kind of nonsense. Listen, if you're job hunting as a 40-year-old, and I'm 40, so I can talk about it, and you go to one office and they have an amazing facility, they have a really comfortable workplace, right? Incredible parking, a cafeteria built in, and then you go to this other place and it's like built under a dump. I mean, which place are you going to be more inclined to go work at? You want to work in places that invest in the people that are there.
Totally. And remember, these guys are 18 years old. They're 18. They're not 40. They're 18. Right. So they are even more, impressed by the shiny objects. And you're absolutely right. It is it's a very valid point, because, it's right. It's how they invest in their facilities, which means how they invest in their team and their whole department. So yeah, I mean, 100%. And that stuff matters. It really does. And whether or not it's right that it matters, it does show the investment in the program, which is something that does translate over the course of years into how successful the program can be. So yeah, very, very important that we do that. And they're kids, guys. They're kids. Of course they want that. When we were 18, we all would have wanted that.
Yeah. Yeah, I 100% agree. Like, Oregon has like some type of waterfall in the lobby, and people are like, "Oh, it's so gimmicky." I'm like, I would have thought that. I would think that's cool now. Like, people like cool things. They like flashy things. They like unique things, right? And that doesn't.
Although if I was an 18-year-old being recruited by Oregon basketball, I would not go there because of that hideous floor.
Oh, it's terrible.
Not going.
So hideous, man. I want to finish here because this generated an interesting discussion. I mentioned that I thought the Johnny Davis team could have made a run and could have made a deep run if injuries didn't happen. There was another discussion about which team was actually more poised to make a deep run, Rajeev. And I want to ping you on this one. The COVID year team that finished on a flurry, and obviously that entire series was wiped out because of COVID. They were playing incredibly well. or the Johnny Davis-led team, who obviously Chucky Hepburn got hurt and Davis clearly was dealing with an injury. Which team, in your opinion, with health and without COVID, would have been better poised to make a run?
Oh boy, that's tough because I want to say the Johnny Davis because of the star power that he had, but I'm going to go with the COVID year because, man, like those guys were really, really pushing. I mean, won the Big Ten, probably would have been a 3, if I remember 3, maybe 4 seed in the tournament, maybe a 3. I think we would have been top 3 seed, which means, you're in a better position to go further. Yeah, I'm going to go the COVID year, but I can see the argument for Johnny Davis because if he's healthy and Chucky, obviously that was a huge loss for us and we'd probably win that game with him. So, but Johnny Davis's ability to drop 40, 45 on any team, if he's hot, that can absolutely take you into, the Sweet 16, Elite 8. Now, if all of a sudden you're in the Elite 8, and again, he just goes off like he did against Purdue, you just never know, right? I mean, so I'm still going to say the COVID year because our team was better. We functioned better. We didn't have quite as many scoring droughts. We still always had some because we're Wisconsin,
Right.
But we didn't have as many scoring droughts. But the team overall played better. But I can see the argument both sides because when you have an NBA lottery pick, that obviously is what's going to give you that initial kind of burst to go further.
Yeah, and the commandant came in and said, I was off on the Johnny Davis team. And that's certainly a valid point because that team lacked depth. They struggled a little bit down the stretch. There was no shooters. I still think it's the Davis team. I think you just have a dude. The first game he played against Purdue is one of the all-time great individual Badger games we've ever seen. He shut down, by the way, Jaden Ivey, who's another lottery pick in that game, alongside scoring 30 plus with like 13 rebounds. He had the ability to single-handedly win games that nobody on that Brad Davidson-led team did. So I think it's the Davis year just because of the star power, but I think it's an awesome discussion, and I don't think there's a wrong answer there.
Right.
Let's wrap it up there. We usually go live with Rajeev, but we did a live show this morning. So Rajeev, as always, thank you so much for jumping on, my friend. On Wisconsin, and let's talk tomorrow.
All right. Appreciate it.